Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 781 with a review of Gladiator II. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week in the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we have returned to talk about the second coming of Gladiator, Gladiator II. Earlier, we recorded a review of Wicked. Now we're talking about Gladiator. Stephen Miller, what are your thoughts on Gladiator 1?
I mean, I had definitely seen Gladiator 1 before. It was one of those movies that I probably watched on TV, though I know I had seen it from beginning to end, but it wasn't that crystallized in my mind. You know, I remembered it as being a fun movie that was kind of maybe mildly, not derided, but it was seen as like the big budget popcorn flick that was like crowding out other more beloved artsy movies at that time. So it had some kind of reputation, you know, being kind of dumb fun, I think. I decided to rewatch it before going in to see Gladiator 2, and spoilers, I'm very glad I did, because the movie assumes a lot about how much I care about the original Gladiator.
Yeah.
And Gladiator 1 rips. that movie rules. It is just like big budget popcorn entertainment. It is all spectacle, and the spectacle, I think, is awesome. So I had a ton of fun with Gladiator watching it 2 days ago when I caught up with it. What about you? What is your relationship with Gladiator?
Nice. It's been a while since I have watched it, but it is a film that I remember fondly. It is the first DVD that I owned. It was like the first thing that I bought that I could put into a thing that played DVDs that I had. And I watched the shit out of it. I saw it in theaters. I had an amazing time with it then. Everybody I knew watched it and loved it at the time. It was just kind of like a thing that I always have remembered as loving at the time. I just never thought to go back and watch it now that it's been, had so much time away from it. But I wasn't always thinking of or asking for a second Gladiator film. Right. It wasn't something that I was clamoring for. But when I heard it was coming out, I was like, all right, whatever, we can do this. I'm willing to be entertained. That's what I'm here for. So I definitely wasn't excited, but I was optimistic, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, Ridley is a kind of like feast or famine director. Sometimes the movies are duds and sometimes they're amazing. Yeah. And it felt like, coin flip. It could be either way. So I was also like cautiously optimistic about this movie. I will say too, as a kid, I was a kind of stereotypical boy in that I played with action figures and I always wanted them to fight each other to the death. Like that was my main hand-to-hand combat was something I was very into as an idea. And the idea of getting to watch a movie that would be about that again, it did tickle something in my brain. So I have to admit, I was pretty excited when the trailer showed that there were going to be like rhinos and shit involved in combat.
When I was a kid, I always played with action figures and they did hand-to-hand combat. I've always wanted a rhino though, so when I saw
I mean, I played with Street Sharks action figures, and not only were there sharks, which are in this movie, but I'm pretty sure there was a rhino too, who was a bad guy. So I've had that fantasy.
Ninja Turtles, right? Had a rhino bad guy.
Oh, was it Ninja Turtles?
Bebop and Rocksteady, one of them is a rhino, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
a rhino
that doesn't
warthog.
preclude it also being Street Sharks. I'll look it up while the trailer is playing.
Cool. All right, and on that note, should I play the trailer, Stephen?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, we're going to take a listen to the trailer for Gladiator 2 and then come back and give everyone a review.
I remember that day. I never forgot it. That a slave could take revenge against an emperor.
Where were you born?
I don't know. I never knew a mother nor a father.
You will be my instrument.
Who are you?
Did you hear that crowd? The greatest temple Rome ever built. The Colosseum. Because this is what they believe in. Power.
General Acacius, there are victories yet still to come.
Rome has so many subjects. She must feed them.
They can eat war!
The arena turns slaves into gladiators, then gladiators into free men.
You have something in you. I knew it from the start.
Did you now?
Rage. And rage is your gift.
This is about survival! Survive! Hold together, and when the charges break, for the wall.
Whose head could I give you that would satisfy this fury?
The entire Roman armies.
Too much?
The general will do.
Rome must fall. I need to only give it a push.
We make it out alive. Alright. Hands on the mausoleum floor. Blood stains the Colosseum doors.
This ring belonged to Maximus. Now I give it to you. What is the dream of Rome? That people are not free.
I was owned. Now I will control an empire.
I will not waste another generation of young men for their vanity.
Strength and honor! This is how Rome treats its heroes!
Hands on the mausoleum floor. Blood stains the Colosseum doors.
The gods have spoken!
That was the trailer for Gladiator II. It's the sequel to Gladiator 1. And it follows a new person, maybe, who has been captured as a slave turned into a gladiator who is trying to fight his way to take out a man at the top. Stephen Miller, what did you think of Gladiator 2?
Yeah, so I thought Gladiator 2 was okay. You know, in a weird way, it is very similar to the review of Wicked that I just recorded, which is that I think there is a thing you go to a Gladiator movie to watch. You know, in Wicked's case, you go to a musical to watch the music, and I think the musical sequences were spectacular there. This movie, you go to watch the action set pieces, the gladiator fights. I think when they are happening, this movie is spectacular. You know, I think the scale of it is very awesome. I think the fights were cool. I alluded before to loving seeing like baboons and rhinos and sharks and stuff involved. Like I had a blast when people were fighting. I feel like there is not that much of that in this movie, or there is less of it than I would have wanted from a Gladiator 2. In its place, I get one, I would say, extremely good performance from Denzel Washington, which is very interesting. Even though he's billed as like not really a main character, he does get a lot of screen time in this movie. And then a kind of like, I would say, nothing performance from Paul Mescal and Pedro Pascal. Like they're not bad. I just don't have a lot to hang my hat on with them. You know, I don't feel like they give me a lot of character to care about. So it is another one of those things where this is a big movie that I watched it being like, well, the stuff I liked was fun, but what else was going on? I kind of walked away from this feeling like I had been somewhat shortchanged by a movie that should have been epic, instead hitting the notes that I wanted it to hit, but not doing a lot in between. I mean, it does have a lot that I like about this universe. You know, like talk about a world that I could enter my old man era and go on a deep dive learning about like Roman emperors and all that stuff. Like I had fun on Wikipedia after rewatching Gladiator 1, watching Gladiator 2, and trying to figure out what, if anything, spoilers, almost nothing, has anything to do with history in this movie. And the names of the emperors is indeed historical. You know, Marcus Aurelius obviously wrote Meditations. Paul Giamatti famously gives that as a present to all of his students in the holdovers. All the different sons. Every emperor in these movies has indeed been an emperor before, and there's something kind of fun about seeing how they tie that together with the world. I do like the idea of this giant world that Rome has conquered being a ripe area to have like different lands with different people that might emerge as fighters. Like there's a lot you could imagine doing in this universe if you wanted to just kind of cynically turn it into a sequel factory. But as a standalone story, I think what bothers me about this movie is it greatly overestimates how much I cared about the story of the first one. In particular, I don't want to spoil this movie, but a lot of it lives or dies on flashbacks to the original with kind of a member berries of, hey, see this thing that you loved? Look, we're doing it again. We're tying it back, to the point where it started to get a little bit ridiculous to me. It also, and this is going to be hard to say without spoiling, it has a weird relationship with technology where there's either casting or de-aging, but I assume casting does a phenomenal job of convincing me that one character has been resurrected in flashbacks, and then another character looks like no time has changed at all in the flashback. It is a kind of odd oversight that, again, I'm tiptoeing around, but I think you understand the two that I'm talking about. Yeah. That I found kind of strange. Like, the little kid in me had fun with the evil twin emperors, you know, who are like just outrageously bad, like the McBoyles in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia or something. They're just kind of like twisted. Go ahead.
Can I ask you a question? How long do you think it took them to cast a person that looks like Joaquin Phoenix, like young Joaquin Phoenix? Like the younger brother, to me, he is doing a spot on like Joaquin Phoenix, like something about his face shape reminds me of Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah. You might remember that actor, by the way, from 8th grade. I believe he plays the creepy guy in the car. He's certainly in 8th grade, at least. But yeah, I think it took them a while to find him, because he does have a lot of the Joaquin Phoenix look and feel.
The funny thing is, it looks like the movie that he used as his inspiration to trying to be Joaquin Phoenix was to go back to Napoleon. Like that was as far back as he was willing to go. But he feels very much like that. Like, I could see him yelling, "You think you're great because you have boats."
I will revise, by the way, he was in 8th grade, but he did not play the creepy guy. He just plays another classmate instead. Okay. But yeah, they definitely tried to replicate that. And it is funny because I believe the original Gladiator, I don't think Ridley Scott set out wanting to have the Joaquin Phoenix character to be that particular kind of creep. I think Joaquin, it was one of the early examples of Joaquin just doing his Joaquin thing, where he's like, if I'm going to do this traditional movie, I'm going to make it as weird as I possibly can. And it works well. And this movie kind of just feels like a pale replica of the original thing that Joaquin did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I should ask before I go further what you thought of Gladiator II.
You know, you kind of compared it to your review of Wicked, like your thoughts were similar to your thoughts on Wicked, or you approached it the same way. And I think that for me, it's like I almost viewed it in the opposite. It's like with Wicked, I was like, I feel like I'm missing so much information, and it's doing a terrible job of communicating the correct information to me to make me follow it or care about what's going on. And I think that somehow Gladiator 2, I have all the information I need to appreciate what it's doing. And even if the performances don't 100% work for me, or I think it's homaging too much, like on paper, the way it connects to the original story, just like I just take it at face value that like, yeah, duh, this is the only way, this is the only story that you would do. I like the performance that Denzel Washington is doing, kind of like I like the performance that Ben Affleck is doing in what was the movie called?
He's in another movie, The Last Duel.
Yeah, The Last Duel. Like in the same way, I kind of love what he's doing. I could have jettisoned his entire character from the story and let it be more condensed and more streamlined and more a story about just the character whose name we will pretend to redact for the whole movie.
Sure.
But like something about it was like, this is kind of enough to justify its existence. It writes itself, and it did. And then they try to pack in more that doesn't need to be there. And I think this film gets overly weighted and has a convoluted narrative that doesn't have to be as, quote, complex as it needs to be. Because the simple fact of who Paul Mescal is playing is enough to justify this movie existing. And I get that they want to try to complicate things and give Denzel Washington the power to like make the connections that he needs to in order for Paul Mescal's character to get what he needs to happen in the story. But something about it just kind of like, it felt overlong, and like I literally needed nothing but Paul Mescal to get in a ring and cut some people up with some swords. And it felt like it needed more than that, and felt it wanted to be clever, and maybe it wanted to be poignant. When all we wanted to do was be entertained.
It's like when a comedian like needs to make their big dramatic movie so they can feel like they made it. It feels like for some reason Ridley needed Gladiator II to be a big sprawling saga that is about something, and it's not really about the thing anyway. It makes it be a kind of odd combo.
And it's like, I love the narrative ways it ties back to the first film, but the way it tries to thematically be like the first time that Paul Mescal's in a fight, right? He's like, hold, but nobody respects him yet. So nobody is treating him as their general. And he's like, I am not a general, but guys, you should follow me because I don't know why. We go to the moon, not me. We fight in the Colosseum not because it is easy, but because it is hard. But like the way that he is trying to play that Russell Crowe role for people who he hasn't earned it from yet feels like direct homaging in a way that feels sad. The way his character, the person, exists in the reality of this world, I think is great, and just enough that it's all that was needed to justify doing this story. So I'm fine with that. I don't really care about the politics or the intrigue of what's going on. I don't care about the supposed thing they're going to achieve by the end of this that we know historically didn't actually get achieved. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that like feels so weird, the story they're trying to tell, when staying simple and staying just the story of the kid growing up to be who he is, that is enough for me to want to watch this movie and to have a good time. And the rest of it was sort of just kind of there. And I just don't know why it needed to be there. But while the entertaining things were happening, I was entertained. So, there's that.
Does it bother you that this movie almost beat for beat is just trying to do exactly what Gladiator 1 did again, down to like that thing they thought they accomplished before? They didn't, but this time they're going to try. And almost every single thing that happens in the first movie happens again in this movie to almost the exact same end. And it's a little bit odd to me that it at once feels like it is trying to broaden, make more epic the saga, try to open it up and introspect and almost flip something on its head, but it isn't flipping anything on its head. It's just doing the exact same thing a second time and expecting a different outcome.
So I hate that as a concept, but I believe the character did that exact same thing, and I believe that the outcomes would be the same, right? Like it is. That's why I'm like, just leave the narrative as simple as possible. Literally be somebody who's trying to follow in somebody else's footsteps and let them try and fail. That's all you need, because that is enough to justify that character. And it like, for some reason, it feels like a cheat code. Like you always talk about a cheat code in a story. It feels like a cheat code that should be able to succeed. And it's only because they try to have more there that it doesn't succeed to me.
Yeah, I just feel like the original movie is simple in a way because Russell Crowe, Maximus, not to be confused with Maximilian Greco, the street shark character who was a mafioso crime boss who had rhinoceros DNA. I did look that up. Maximus, he is like the simple good man archetype. He's the person who is dreaming of a better Rome, and he's the only good man, and everyone else is opportunistic, and they need him to show them the way. This movie, it tries to do that again, but it doesn't have the good man. Like, it doesn't have, the motivations are not that at all, and we're never given a kind of rousing speech or a hoorah or a reason to be like, yes, absolutely, I'm on this person's side. Like, Paul Mescal has kind of confused motivations for like 80% of this runtime. And I don't know, to me, there was something weird about doing a cookie cutter remake of the first movie when you didn't actually have the sauce underneath. But then you said that everything would go down that way. So I'm curious why you feel that. I just like, Paul Mescal is playing a character
who has trained for this and really has no motivations of their own other than pure revenge. Like, this is a character who is sort of participating in a John Wick sort of, I got to kill all the people who killed my people, right? And anything that is a broader political ideology of this dream of Rome, nothing in any of these stories really tells me what the dream of Rome is, other than people saying, like, I had a dream for Rome and it was this. But, like, it's
Ask
like
not what Rome can do for you.
it's just like they want a democratic Senate that rules Rome instead of an emperor. But, like, none of the characters were actively working towards that before they had a chance to kill a person who did bad to them, right? Like, it's really just John Wick with swords. You know what I mean? So, like,
but if I'm following right, like, no time elapses. Like, he hasn't been training for this. He just kind of is this immediately. You know, unless, again, there was some cut to X years later that I missed. I feel like the inciting event and then him being in Rome is like 5 days.
No. This movie is the cut to.
But, well, okay, now we would maybe need to talk in spoilers, because I don't think anything about his life is planning for this moment until Pedro Pascal gets involved, which happens all in this movie.
He idolized a gladiator.
Sure. Yeah, we won't say which one.
He idolized the titular gladiator.
It was actually Commodus that he idolized, the like 5 seconds that he's fighting in the ring. Commodus did have moves, by the way.
So he was like, dude, being a gladiator is what it's all about. If I could be a gladiator one day, that would be fucking great. He grows up to fight in armies for little villages, and really his only ideological bent is, I'm living in the one city that is not ruled by Rome, and that's cool. And then Rome attacks them one day, and he's like, shit, now I'm ruled by Rome, right?
Yeah, it's Braveheart, basically.
Yeah, his fighting is not really ideological, it's purely revenge based, right? Because he's not even like, I hope to win, gain my freedom, then get an army, gain my freedom, then get an army, then come back and take over Rome and then let it be for the people. He's just like, I'm just gonna fight as long as I can until I can kill somebody who killed my wife. Which is basically what Russell Crowe did in the first Gladiator, right?
Right. But
at least in the first Gladiator, Russell Crowe was like, damn, I gave everything for these people and then they fucked me over. Now I really want to kill them, right? It was like an added level of revenge that was in there. He was the Northman, right?
Yeah.
It was, I'm going to paddle a boat and just name all the people who I'm going to get revenge for. So this film, I'm fine with the idea of this character who idolized that character having built himself up to be a soldier who could be a gladiator, but he's a free man now, and then suddenly losing that freedom and then being like, well, now I'm doing the thing that I always thought would be cool. It's not that cool. It kind of sucks, but I'm going to do it. You know, like I was just fine with that, him being on that same path and going through that same process, because it seems like that's a pretty common process for anybody who is in an army that does something that Rome doesn't like. You just get turned into a war criminal slave person who then has to fight in the arenas. So like, for me, it wasn't that difficult to like go like, oh, cool, we're doing this. All right, let's do it. Right. It didn't seem like it needed anything more than that. And I was not watching this as a historical epic about how people strive to free Rome from the tyranny of an emperor, right? I wasn't trying to apply it to modern sensibilities of governance, right? Like there was nothing that this film was doing that it was asking me to do other than be like, what if another dude had his wife killed and he's real pissed about it?
Yeah, I guess it's just the wrinkle, and I guess this isn't too spoilery, is Pedro Pascal is established as a largely sympathetic character early in this movie. And so the twist that this movie is trying to do is that the person he wants revenge on, unlike Joaquin Phoenix, who is just like the most hateable man on earth, you know, in the first movie, here he is a guy that we are meant to like not necessarily agree with Paul Mescal in his quest. And yet the vast majority of this movie, that is his only quest. And there's just something about that and how suddenly it turns, again, much like Wicked has a sudden turn. There's just something that I'm not saying I didn't buy it, like I needed this to be an intellectual movie. It's like there's something that makes the popcorn taste better. And it is like me rooting for the character, me vibing with the character, me wanting to like shake my fist and go, hell yeah. And for some reason, it feels like this movie didn't have the connective tissue to make me feel that way at all. Like, honestly, the person I most rooted for was probably Denzel. He has, like, you could imagine a world where he is the main character with his backstory and what he's trying to accomplish and his own kind of grievances and everything. And that would also be the more modern day socially resonant message, you know?
But he gets to say he already lived that story. So,
right.
So it bounces stuff out. I mean, it would have been better, too, if they did switch him with Paul Mescal, because then he would have the chance to say the line, "They tried to kill my wife."
Or his other famous line from Flight when they're on the boat. Do a barrel roll. Oh, that was Star Fox. Sorry. I always get those two confused.
What else?
I don't know. I feel like the action sequences are really fun in this movie. I did have a great time watching them. I feel like there's not a lot of meat on this bone. I don't know. It was maybe I was in a bad mood this weekend when I went to see both movies. I didn't feel like there was a lot of there. And I was entertained, you know, as the classic question that you were going to ask me probably when you going to verdicts. I know you. I was entertained, but I wasn't much more. And it isn't that I wanted it to be smarter. I want it to either be a lean, mean fighting machine like John Wick, or I want it to have whatever its themes and characters are tied together to make me want to go hoorah. And for some reason, this movie didn't quite do either. It felt a little bit long, but when I think back, I can't think of what it was spending that screen time doing other than flashing back to a better Gladiator movie instead, which felt a little bit thirsty to me, maybe the 5th or 6th time that it did it.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. Like, I'm not going to the bat for this film at all. But it's just like, by the time I realized what it was doing, I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And then I just sat back and just waited for everything, right? Like, it was a thing where it just like, it all clicked into place. And I was like, there's almost nothing this movie could do that would lose me that hard, because what it's striving for is so little that I was just there to have fun with it and kind of enjoy what it was doing and enjoy the hamminess of like what Denzel was bringing to the table. Like the line, "I have your house. I want your loyalty." That line, I was like, all right, this is like, he's in his own movie. He's doing his own thing. This is fucking great. And everything that Paul Mescal was doing was like, all right, you're literally, the character, quite literally trying to be Russell Crowe. So I can't ask that much more of you than to just do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
But you know what's not fair? Having a bunch of unarmed people who are chained up have to fight a bunch of baboons.
That is definitely not fair. Baboons are scary. I can't tell how much this is true to life in terms of the rendering of the baboons, because they seemed monstrous to me.
Talk about there being not that much meat on the bone.
Right.
Those guys were emaciated.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Paul Mescal sees exactly how much meat is on the bone.
Because he bites.
He eats it.
Bites
he bites it.
Verdict, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm going to have to give this a wait for rental the same way I give Wicked a wait for rental. I think this does what it's supposed to do. I'm really not complaining, even though my review sounds mostly like I'm complaining. I just think, man, if it weren't for the Denzel performance that I think is like legitimately very good in this movie, even though it is kind of in its own movie, I just think there's not a lot of there here. And I feel like Ridley knows how to stage an awesome action set piece. He does that really well here. Denzel is great. Everything in between kind of didn't work for me. So calibrate your expectations and you'll have a fine rental. But I again feel like this could have been a lot more than it is.
Yeah, I will leave it as a wait for rental as well. I wasn't insulted by this film, but I might have insulted the film in the way I watched it. So those two things canceled each other out. I was entertained enough by it to sort of make it to the end. I do love, as you said, the Denzel performance. On paper, it's in the trailer, but on paper, the fight between Pascal and Mescal works so, like, on paper, it is perfect. It is like the trailer moment from like, oh, both of the men in the ring are brothers, you know, like it's that sort of it, like the stakes of a battle to the death between who those people are. I can see how the people in the writer's room were like, oh, this is gonna be so good, people are gonna eat this up. And in reality it doesn't amount to much, but I still see what they were going for, and I still like the idea of it. So this film didn't disappoint me. It didn't do bad enough to disappoint me. It just sort of was a thing that I was kind of like, all right, cool. I guess this is where we're going. All right, let's sit back, eat my second Shiz University chicken wrap of the day.
I was about to ask, did they have themed drinks here? Did you have Gladiator to go along with this one?
Man, that would have been good. That reminds me of a joke I didn't use earlier about I was waiting for Paul Mescal to start singing Defying Legacy.
Defying Gladiator.
But yeah, anyways, you know, Gladiator 2, we'll see in the next one. Was there any kids in this one that could show back up at Gladiator 3?
They really didn't tee up any kids. I mean, I guess I don't know what happens to the monkey. maybe it'll tie into the apes movies. That would be kind of fun. They already have the names.
Yeah, Caesar. Caesar said, "Don't kill human. Only kill human that bite ape."
I do think in terms of Scott, Denzel Washington collabs, I still think the Tony Scott movies are overall more fun than the Ridley Scott ones.
Yeah,
personal taste. This didn't move the needle for me.
This the Colosseum wasn't the size of the Chrysler Building.
Exactly. Dude, that movie is so much fun.
Oh, I still haven't seen it, which is wild because I was so stoked.
You've seen the SNL parody a billion times.
Yeah, I've seen the SNL parody for longer than the runtime of the movie.
There are so many bangers, like Crimson Tide, Man on Fire, Deja Vu. You would love if you haven't seen.
Oh yeah, I've seen Deja Vu.
You would have so much fun with that.
Yeah, that was a movie where I'm like, this is the dumbest and greatest idea that's ever existed.
Yes.
When he's in the Hummer.
Exactly, that is the best scene in any movie that has ever been made.
I'm like, who thinks of this shit? But man, I want to go back and watch that again.
Yep.
All right, but we're not here to talk about Deja Vu or any of these other films. We were here to talk about Gladiator 2, but we did that. We gave our reviews. It's time to close out the episode. Stephen Miller, people want to find you throughout the week. Where can they do that?
People can find me at Threads and Blue Sky at sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or Christopher IRL on a number of social platforms. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so on Overcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you're enjoying that. Yeah, that's it for this week. We're taking off, and we'll be back next week with another review. Later.
Bye.